Today we're going to discuss the top 5 young NHL players who could most benefit from a change of scenery and a trade to another team. We'll get into all that coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey, and welcome to an episode of what we're going to call NHL Trade Talk, where we take a look at some players who could very well benefit from a change of scenery if their teams that they're with now could ship them to another location to really get their careers hopefully on track. Now, the players we're going to be discussing today were drafted fairly high for the most part, all came into the league with a lot of promise, and also have not really lived up to expectations, but still show a lot of signs of having a lot of potential, and with a different team, a different system, different teammates, and everything that comes with that, very well could still possibly succeed and kind of salvage their careers and turn out to be stronger full-time NHL players than they currently are here today. Down below in the description, you're going to find an article from the Hockey News which inspired this video. They had a similar type of take on some young players that they thought could benefit from a change of scenery. Obviously, I didn't completely agree with all of their selections and kind of put my own spin on it. So let's dive in here with my top 5 players who could benefit from a change of scenery. First up, we've got Minnesota Wild forward Joel Eriksson, who's now 22 years old. It was taken in that very deep 2015 draft, taken number 20 overall. Obviously came in with a lot of potential, and I really still think that there is a lot of potential in this player, but the results are just not quite getting done here during his time with the Wild, and perhaps a change of scenery could certainly change that. Over the past few years, he's played in 148 NHL games and put up 37 points with Minnesota. Now, of course, in recent years, the Minnesota Wild haven't been the most offensive team, and maybe the systems that they play just don't really benefit his style here. He hasn't really been able to grab a consistent role with higher ice time, and really that team, in my opinion, needs to kind of go through a bit of a rebuild. But unfortunately, that draft in 2015 produced a lot of high-end hockey players, and Minnesota thought that Joel Eriksson was going to turn out to be one of those guys for their team. Unfortunately, things haven't worked out. I know he's still young, and even if he stays in Minnesota, he very well could get things turned around to get him on the right line, the right combination of players. Maybe there's a change in head coach and there's a different style of play. There's all kinds of little things that can happen within the organization to help get this player back on track. But after 148 games with Minnesota and mediocre at best results, I really think a change of scenery would really benefit this player and hopefully get his career back on track. Next up, we've got Sam Bennett of the Calgary Flames. Now, of course, Sam Bennett came into the NHL with even more promise than Eriksson did. He came in as a number 4 overall selection in that 2014 NHL draft, which has certainly seen its fair share of hits and misses and not high up in the first round. Sam Bennett has really been able to get himself a regular spot in the Flames lineup. He's been able to play over 300 NHL games so far. He's currently a restricted free agent in need of a new contract, and the Calgary Flames find themselves in a tough salary cap situation. They also need to sign a top RFA in Matthew Tkachuk, who's going to be demanding some pretty significant money. Their potential goaltender of the present and immediate future, at least, David Rittich, who's 26 years old, is a restricted free agent, appears to be that guy who's going to run with the starter's job for the short term at least. Hopefully things work out for him. He needs a new contract too. So obviously they're kind of in a situation where they do need to make some moves. Now, it doesn't have to be Sam Bennett. They certainly have other players when it comes to the salary cap situation that could be moved. They've been rumored to be moving some potential defensemen, whether it be Michael Stone, TJ Brody, maybe even Travis Hamonic. There could be another forward as well, like a Michael Frolik. Could also benefit of a change of scenery and help the cap situation with the Flames. But as they go through all of these moves, a player like Sam Bennett is still young enough, would have enough value that another franchise very well might want to take a chance on him to see if they can bring up more of that offensive potential he came into the NHL with. So as I mentioned, he has 312 games played, put up 116 points, and for the most part, like I said, he's been able to carve himself out a pretty decent spot to be a regular NHL player over the last number of years now. He's been a pretty solid bottom 6 guy, and like I said, he does bring value to the Flames. It's not that he hasn't been able to be a regular, contribute to his team. It's just not nearly in a way that they expected when they drafted him, but there's still that potential that's there, that with a different role and a different scenery here, that maybe another team can help bring that out in Sam Bennett. And like I said, with all the salary cap implications and some potential cap casualties, could he end up being that guy? Now, it's not the first time that I've talked about him as potentially being a trade target for the Flames to move on from. His name has been mentioned in rumors in the past. There isn't really anything on the forefront right now saying he's going to be traded, but the Flames are a team that's been And discussed in the rumor mill a fair bit, just because of the cap situation, they have to do something. And could it be youngster Sam Bennett, who still has more value over an aging defenseman who's kind of starting to decline a little bit? It certainly remains to be seen, and we'll see how they proceed here. But I can't help but wonder if Sam Bennett could be a stronger offensive player if given a different role with a change of scenery. Next up, we've got Josh HoSang, 23 years old, the New York Islanders. Came into the league as well with a lot of promise, but even when he was drafted, his stock started to fall. He's clearly a very talented offensive player, and there's certainly some other off-ice issues, whether it be attitude and different things that have impacted his career as well. We've even seen the possibility that he was going to be drafted high in the first round, but obviously many teams shied away from him due to all that extracurricular stuff, and he ended up dropping to go to the Islanders pretty low here in the first round. They decided to kind of take a flyer on him and give him an opportunity, given the fact that where they were drafting at. Had they been picking higher, they very well might have passed over him here as well. But that 2014 draft certainly had, like I said, its fair share of hits and misses. And really, right now, you can't help but wonder if HoSang's lack of opportunity has been more of a result of the extracurricular off-ice stuff and more so than his actual talent level. He's been able to play 53 NHL games and put up 24 points, which really isn't too bad for somebody still getting their feet wet. He's had a couple full seasons now in the American Hockey League as well. Obviously gets sent back to junior while he was eligible after being drafted for the first little while as well. And his numbers in junior and the American Hockey League certainly are pretty solid. He's played 156 games in the American Hockey League over the past few years and put up 110 points, so he certainly deserves an opportunity. But at the same time, regardless of all that extracurricular stuff and how the Islanders really feel about him as a person and how he fits in the locker room, there's certainly built up a pretty decent depth chart on Long Island. They have a lot of great prospects that are either with the team now or about to be, likely starting this year, that are going to end up passing him here on the depth chart. At 23 years old, he's certainly not really considered a prospect anymore, given his age and the fact that he does have over 50 NHL games. Like, I know when I do my prospect rankings coming up here for the Islanders, I won't be including HoSang as a prospect for sure, just because of all that experience that he's already garnered here over the last number of years. So he very well could be passed by and may not get that opportunity there anyways. And maybe if he can get into the right organization, who can certainly continue to give him a shot here and see if he can mature and get things together, he might be able to salvage his career and actually turn out to be a pretty good offensive NHL player, like many projected him to be when he was still a teenager even. So will Josh HoSang finally get that change of scenery, whether it be this summer or coming up soon from the Islanders off to a new organization? I guess will remain to be seen, but I think he could benefit from it quite a bit if that happens. Next up, we have 23-year-old defenseman with the Dallas Stars, Julius Honka. Now, he's a player we have talked about more recently here within the rumor mill and NHL Trade rumor talk that's been going around the league. He's certainly been passed by on the depth chart within the Dallas Stars organization, and seeing the other moves they've made to kind of improve their blue line this offseason really cements the fact that there really isn't a regular spot for him, and I think they've kind of lost faith in his ability to be a regular NHL player, at least with their organization. They brought in some other veterans that kind of take over some more of the bigger minute roles. We've seen another youngster, Miro Heiskanen, really emerge last year as being a terrific young defenseman on that team. Certainly one of the better young defensemen around the NHL, who's certainly going to be most likely at least a top pair guy for them for a long time. You get John Klingberg there as well, who's also a really solid, who's still pretty young as well. So the Dallas Stars are kind of passed by Honka, and I think a change of scenery would go a long ways to helping him maybe get another opportunity to see if he can get his NHL career back on track. Now, Honka is another player from that 2014 NHL draft who was taken number 14 overall, and so far, like a lot of these other guys we've discussed, just haven't lived up to the hype that they were drafted with here. But that 2014 draft, like I mentioned here a couple times already, really just is another great example of the hits and misses in that draft. It certainly was not one of the better draft years here on record here recently. Obviously, there were still lots of great players selected as well, but there certainly appears to be a lot of potential first-round bust in that draft as well. So far, Honka's got into 87 games and put up 13 points. Like I said, he's been a player over this offseason, especially that's been mentioned in trade rumors. He's a currently restricted free agent defenseman who needs a new contract. Was offered a qualifying offer, which I do find a little bit surprising, just given the fact that they clearly want to move on. But I guess they maybe saw him as a trade target rather than just letting him walk as a UFA, because that's what would have happened here. Let's see if another team gave him an opportunity. I don't imagine the price tag could have been too high for what they're looking for here. Probably another prospect or maybe, second, third round pick. I'm not sure exactly what they would be looking for, but it wouldn't be anything too much if another team wants to come along and offer the Stars an opportunity to give this guy a fresh start in their organization. Next up, we've got the number 4 overall pick in the 2016 NHL Draft. This won't come as anybody's surprise, and that's Jesse Puljujarvi, of course, forward for the Edmonton Oilers, who's made it clear he wants a fresh start. He's not going to play in the NHL until he gets that, as he does not want to suit up for the Edmonton Oilers here in the future. And now, of course, there is still, I think, a small possibility that things could change with Puljujarvi, and we very well might see him in training camp. I'm not ready to completely rule that out. I've seen the comments from him and his agent, and really, I know at this point, it's pretty slim chance that things would change and end up that way. They're also talking that he could play in Europe if Edmonton does not facilitate a trade to get him the fresh start that he's looking for. It was rumored he likely would go back and play somewhere in Finland, be closer to home, continue developing, and see if he can get another crack at the NHL maybe next season. But I guess we'll see. So far, it looks like Ken Holland's kind of willing to call their bluff here a little bit, not going to rush into a trade. They can find the right deal that works for the Oilers, and certainly they will make that trade. It was been speculated here that they're looking for probably a second-round pick and maybe a decent prospect, maybe even a B-level prospect. Something to that effect would likely be what's included. He has been able to get into 139 games played, put up 37 points, and I know many people feel that the Edmonton Oilers certainly have kind of botched his development and certainly rushed him to the NHL too quickly, but sometimes that happens when you get NHL teams that are really desperate for players to jump into their lineup and they're trying to accelerate their rebuild. Sometimes players get rushed and they're not ready, and I have seen other cases where it kind of stunts their development, and sometimes they can get back on track, and sometimes they can't. It just depends. But obviously, even with all the changes the Oilers organization have made, they have a new head coach, they get a new GM, trying to have some new philosophy, a new way of doing things there. And Puljujarvi's camp still seems adamant that a fresh start's what he needs. Now, could we possibly see some of these guys on my list maybe even be swapped for each other? I don't think it's unrealistic to think that it's something that very well could happen. We'll take a look at the teams that these players are on. There's certainly some glaring needs on some of these organizations that maybe a swap might be best for them, and maybe the teams would be more willing to make that trade for getting another struggling prospect in return. Like I said, some of these guys are still considered more of prospects than others. Obviously, some of these guys have a fair bit of NHL experience, even though they're still really young. Obviously, the oldest age on this list is 23 years old. And they still have the time and the potential to get their careers on track and be more of a stronger player than they currently are here today. So, of course, as always, love to hear your thoughts and opinions on the list that we discussed here today. And who are some other young NHL players that you feel would really benefit from a change of scenery if they were able to get a trade to a new organization that could really get their career on track and become more of the player that they were thought to be when they were first drafted by the NHL clubs? If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.